It's like a real legit podcast.
Let's just not talk about this.
Okay. So I wanted to. All right, so we're recording.
We are. We're here with Omar Gallardo.
It is
Thanks for joining
February 10th, year 2024, Santa Rosa, California.
It's Chinese New Year.
It's Chinese New Year as well. Ring it in. Part of what we wanted to do is just cover Chicano history in Sonoma County.
Damn.
Yeah, Chicano history,
Órale.
and which is movement history, which is cultural practice history, which is kind of just. And I think Omar is like a bridge between old school Sonoma County Chicano and the new school, my generation of activism, of organizing, and then and Karim represents the
I was like the young guy.
the younger.
Around. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to say the tail end because I imagine it's still
It's still
happening.
going.
It's still going. But there's there's temporadas. So we want to kind of like get into some of the history. Ciclos, exactly. of how it's come about, and I am a product of your involvement. You might not have known that, or you didn't know that was going to happen. You might not see it like that, but there's without a doubt I'm a product of the work you were doing way back and continued doing and brought into Sonoma State. And so we just want to kind of like, I want to get somewhat of the names and stories of how it came about through you, because you're also a representative of other Chicanos, Chicanas that were here in Sonoma County studying, doing the work, and are still doing the work. So I want to get those trajectories. And so we wrote out some questions. I'm gonna be looking at my notes a little bit, but and I know I messed up where you were from in Michoacan initially. So tell us where you were born.
Well, let me tell you. So I was born in Tumbiscatillo de Ruiz, Michoacán.
Yeah.
So it's in the area of the area de Tierra Caliente in Michoacán. It's going towards the coast. It's hot. I was born there, never lived there. So very young, at a very young age, my parents had a house in Uruapan, and so that's kind of where I kind of grew up. For my early childhood, I grew up there in
Uruapan.
Yeah. So it's like I think it's still the second largest city in Michoacán, and but yeah, kind of grew up there.
Until what age?
About 5.
Okay.
And then my dad was over here working in the logging industry.
At this
here,
time, when you're
around this time, yeah. When we were out there, we were out back home, back in Michoacán, and
so just so we can date you, what year is this?
I was born in 1975, and so around between 1975 and 1980,
he was already up here.
Yeah, he was already up here
working lumber.
And
Geyserville or
no, up in Philo, the Mendocino area, Philo, and like all over. I mean, he would tell the stories about him working all over, following the Las Piscas and everything. But eventually, how I remember him is just him working when he went back one time and around 1980, and then says, we're moving up to the United States, and
so he came back to Uruapan
and
was like, let's go.
Let's go, and so we came back, and so it was when he was working up here, he was working in the lumber industry up there, cutting down redwood trees. And around that time, 1980 or so, he was working up there and had a slip. A redwood tree fell on his back, and kind of changed the course of a lot of things. So
in what way?
Well, I mean, I think he became he wasn't able, he became disabled. He wasn't able to work as hard as he really liked to. He was always like kind of valuing work and how you should work and everything, and still kind of with, he was that memorial for, I think my early memories of Santa Rosa were that, just kind of him being in the hospital for a pretty large period of time, and then eventually, yeah, getting out, and then trying to work here and there, and eventually, he wasn't able to perform, as he always used to, as he would like to, because he really valued work. And so anyway, so I think that's, we went all of a sudden, after 5 years here in the United States, decided to move back, to Michoacan, and so
You
we were,
did too.
yeah, so we all went back because
Like you're 10
I'm 10.
at this point.
I'm 10. I think, yeah, I was 10 years old, and so we went back, and then around that time, he had gotten some money through, his Social Security and whatnot, and so was able to get some of his pension and whatnot, and so he was able to buy some land up in the area of, still Tierra Caliente, over in Nueva Italia and Lombardia area.
Hmm.
So actually we moved into Urapan back, but he bought some land over there. We decided to move back over there to Tierra Caliente, where all the land was and everything. And so that's kind of where I then, just my memories up there was kind of just being around, kind of growing up 10, actually 12, maybe 12, 13 years old, and kind of just starting to work out and work, and seeing how life in Mexico was. Like I was in school, but also I knew I was sent out to work, here and there. I mean, some of my friends were 15 years old and already had families. It was crazy. And so I do remember that, and I did get the opportunity to go to school. My mom valued school, and my dad valued education, and so I was able to go to la primaria, no, la secundaria, in Lombardia or Gabriel Zamora, for 1 year. So we've been bouncing back and forth.
And when you all were up here, he was up in Philo, but were you in Cloverdale?
No, we were in Santa Rosa.
Oh, Santa Rosa.
We lived in Santa Rosa.
From 5 to 10.
Yeah, we lived over here on West 9th. West 9th wasn't the West 9th that it is. I think that it was,
Why?
There was a period of time, because it was really heavily gang involved. There was a lot of gang involvement. But we had, it was right before that. Because I remember leaving the house as a kid. I went to West 9th, to Lincoln Elementary School, and I remember like going out to the park and not coming back home until like 9, 10 o'clock at night.
It was all good.
And a lot of my friends were, I think Eddie Alvarez was among those. I didn't know until like now, like we all lived in that area. And so, we were always outside, we didn't come back until like late. But I remember things, I think when we left around in 1985 or so, from Santa Rosa, went back to Mexico, like things changed in that area. So, but yeah, we were in Santa Rosa, and then.
So when you're the oldest of 5 siblings. You're 5 total.
Yeah.
And you're the oldest.
Yeah.
All mujeres, all sisters.
Yeah. So 4 sisters. I'm the oldest.
Were you the only one born in Mexico?
No, there was 3 of us. There was myself, Marilu, and Olga, and then Merlina and Blanca were born here. In those transition back and forth.
And all of you were going back and forth?
Yeah. So I think, when we came back here, Blanca and Merlina were born, and then we went back to Mexico, and then all of us went back to Mexico for a while, and then we came back when we all came back again.
How old were you the next time you came
15.
back? 15 years old.
Yeah, that's
to where?
Geyserville.
Geyserville.
So when I got to Geyserville, I enrolled in Geyserville High School. So in Mexico I was had gone. They had dropped me a few grades because I couldn't, read and write in Spanish or whatnot. And so when I came back, I couldn't read and write in English. So it was crazy. And so I went, actually, I don't know, my grades went up and down. Like I was in Mexico, they dropped me a couple of grades. Over here, when I came back, they bumped me up a couple of grades. In essence, I basically skipped my middle school. I really didn't have middle school at all. Maybe 1 year in Mexico, that which was which was primero de secundaria, which is like 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think all of that, like, I believe, like, when I came over, that just that 1 year of primero secundaria was a lot. Uh, I already, there was a lot of education that 1 year that actually prepared me almost, really with the skills. I think maybe not in English, but I think the skills to kind of be able to hack it out in ninth grade.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody was so much more mature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just over in Mexico, and the education system was a lot more formal. I mean, I had to wear a uniform, and so there's all that formality. I think gave me some type of structure and some type of dedication and whatnot when I came up here, so that I was messing around. So, yeah, so.
And you were also doing the baile folklorico at this point, and
so
were you involved with the Latino Student Congress too?
Yeah.
So at first I want to see like how it was, because you were essentially raised by like a tribe of women at this point, like it's your 4 sisters, your moms, and how that impacted you. Or if you think it did.
Yeah, so my dad never drank,
Uh-huh.
and when he had the accident, um, as I was told, like, he started drinking a lot and whatnot. So that really impacted him, and definitely, had impacted all the family and his behavior and whatnot, and eventually, kind of took him, kind of took his life and whatnot. Just really got into the addiction and whatnot, and so because he couldn't work, he could barely walk and whatnot. So I think
it sounded like that's what he prided himself on.
Yeah,
like work.
yeah. And so I think my mom definitely kind of really stuck it out and really kind of went to bat for us, and so she when we came back here to the United States, we were in Geyserville and whatnot, so she was working at in the fields. She says that she could prune grapes, and the only thing that she doesn't know is how to what do you call injertar, the graft. Like, that's the only thing that she never learned how to, because nobody would ever teach her. But she could do anything better, and sometimes, like, she says that some of the guys would actually like get pissed off because she was just leaving behind on how just from pruning to amarrando to anything in the field. But eventually she got into like working in the wineries and whatnot. Worked at Trinity Winery. Really cool people. They really treated the family pretty good. They treated her good. To what my mom says, like they're really supportive. But eventually my mom also eventually got her back started kind of giving out. I mean, it took a toll.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she was doing that, and yeah, so my sisters, so there was 4 sisters that I had to kind of grow up with, and definitely put me into shape.
What does that mean? What does it mean?
I mean, yeah, I mean,
what does that look like?
What does that look like? Well, I think that they all stuck for each other, stuck up for each other. I just I had to kind of learn how to really I think they really challenged my perception of what it was to be women. And it just kind of just that whole machista attitude or whatever that that would surface. I mean, they were all there to kind of just put it down. And eventually I think more and more just the kind of developing that respect for a lot of what they were doing. A lot of we just really trying to deal with life, with a single mom. Eventually my dad, my parents separated, and my dad did pass away, and this happened around when I was going to Sonoma State. It happened later and whatnot, but
yeah, I was never sure about the time it was your pops.
Yeah, so but I think them, my sisters really had a good role model in my mom. I mean, I think to a big degree, I think the biggest role models that I've had in my life have all been women.
Yeah.
And so from my family to people who I've been around with, But I mean, I think right now, like you hear the whole thing of like mentorship, or so and so is a mentor, or so I looked up to this person or whatever. It was really never formal back in the days. Like I remember for other people, but I mean, growing up, there wasn't really. I mean, the people who I kind of learned from it was very informal. It was just observing and how they carried themselves out and things like that. So I'll probably talk a little bit more about, I think, in some of the questions.
Yeah.
But I think yeah, I mean, my mom was able to provide that that steady positive energy and pushing, but ever so gently as well.
Yeah, and your sisters are amazing too. I mean, yeah, I can see them defending themselves and giving you shit and like, but they're awesome. They're awesome. I mean, you guys got a good little tribe right there. And so like you're in Geyserville around this point, and from like the way I picture Geyserville High is like small, bunch of Mexicans and bunch of like working class whites is kind of how I view what I've heard from you. And so like yeah, what was it? What was Geyserville High like at that point?
No, it was interesting. I remember we came back. We were actually working in the fields one time, and I was working right across right across in the field, right across the high school. And I remember looking at the bus, and I was like, oh shoot, I wish I could go to school. At first, we weren't going to school. We didn't go to school for a few months. Eventually, it was somebody from Migrant Education who kind of reached out to my mom and whatnot, and it's like, the kids should be in school and whatnot. And so eventually so she was.
So you're seeing the school bus go by, you're like, shit, I want to ride that.
We had to duck. We had to duck because we were underage and whatnot. And so it was my my older sisters and myself picking grapes or out there, and so yeah, so it was a lot of once we got enrolled, it was really interesting because it was probably half, maybe almost half, maybe at least a third of the school was farm workers. Farm workers and other families that had been there for quite a while.
Not a huge campus either.
No. So it was I think it's 6th grade through 12 back in the days. And my sisters were at the elementary school, but I was enrolled in 9th grade, and yeah, so it was some families that had been in Sonoma County, some of the first families in Sonoma County, Latino families that had been in the county for a while, were around, like Lepe family, and some other folks who were from back in, from my town, that were around there, and so they really helped us out. So I came in, we come in, and I think we were able to, you could hear Spanish all over the place. And the school, I think from 6 through 12, I think it was like almost like maybe 400 students at the most. I think
you guys couldn't even like fill up a soccer team.
We
like a baseball team.
We barely could. We didn't have a football team. That's why a lot of folks. There was a lot of students that really wanted a football team, but we could only get a soccer team because you could, a lot of Mexicanos would actually would play soccer, right? And they wouldn't necessarily play football, right? And so anyway, yeah. So the helmet, there was only a helmet in the office somewhere, and it was like a Green Bay Packers helmet. Looked like it's like green and gold because those are the colors of the school and whatnot. But yeah, those are just memories. But because it was all, and so there was only a varsity soccer team, so we'd always get our butts kicked. So we didn't have a JV.
What was your position?
I was goalie.
Portero.
So I was a goalie.
What schools would you play against?
So we played against Round Valley, Laytonville, Kelseyville.
Bro, you're getting beat by Kelsey.
Well, eventually we got pretty good. Sometimes we got to a point where we actually our varsity team gave Hillsburg, which was pretty good at the time. We gave them a run for their money. It just all came down to their porra getting involved in the big old charco. Yeah, but yeah, so but yeah, I think going back to just the families that were involved. I think there's a lot of Mexicano families that were involved. a lot of Italian families that had been there for a while.
Wealthy
and,
or working
you know,
class?
a lot of the there were a lot of there's some of them were, worked. I think I'm trying to remember if a lot of them actually owned the vineyards around.
Interesting.
Because I think some of the larger vineyard owners actually send their kids to Hillsburg, to St. John's and things like that. So, but a lot of them actually had their kids. I mean, vineyard owners and whatnot. I mean, a lot of these families. I think some of them owned the shops in the town.
Right.
Not that many, but so.
And did you find yourself kicking it with Mexicanos, with like mixed?
Yeah.
Like what was it like?
It was good. It was a good experience. I don't think we ever really. I don't think I really saw any direct, like where it was just blatant racism in the school. And as a matter of fact, I think because of the Ballet Folklorico, the Folklorico, the Mayo Club, which was the biggest club on campus, aside from all the other clubs and whatnot. The Mayo Club, the Ballet Folklorico,
Mexican American Youth Organization.
Yeah. So the Mayo Club was the biggest one. They were really active. The parents were active in the town. I remember at one time they tried to get the Ballet Folklorico's money to get put into the general fund, and la señora Graciela Flores was kind of really organizing the Ballet Folklorico, brought in Cristina Briano, and I think Cristina Briano and I can't remember who else from La Ventana back in the days, and to a school board meeting. Oh man, I mean they really, they were really involved, and it didn't happen. So eventually we got the Ballet Folklorico to actually be to actually offer credit, graduating credit for PE and art
At Geyserville
High School.
Nice.
So right now, like you see all the Ballet Folkloricos that are in town and all over the Sonoma County and whatnot, like we actually had the biggest Ballet Folklorico, student Ballet Folklorico. So I know also it's I can't remember her name over at Santa Rosa High School. There was a Ballet Folklorico, Ron and otra maestra. They had
Yolanda Martinez?
No, they worked with her there, but they had a folklorico, Ballet Folklorico, but it was for adults and everything. They had been dancing for a while.
So why Geyserville? What was happening in Geyserville that, like, who was orchestrating this? Because all the stuff we're talking about doesn't just happen. It's like people are in there.
I think it was I think it was the families and also just the students that were really involved. I think the administration, to a certain degree, the teachers. We had a lot of Spanish-speaking teachers.
Nice.
So Fernando Nugent was there. So he was, Fernando was a history teacher. He had been there for a while. Reina Salgado, when I got there, I think was her second, maybe first or second year. Reina Salgado is Tomas Salinas' mom.
Oh wow!
Right?
Wow.
And they had been in Mecha. She was a mechista at Sonoma State. Juana Zamora became the director of the state for Minicore. She was working at Geyserville, right? And so, and then Maureen Wallace, who was a secretary. She was the administrative secretary to the superintendent. She would always drive us with a Ballet Folklorico everywhere, and she spoke Spanish.
Interesting.
And then later on, when we graduated, maybe a few years ago, found out in her passing, the Unitarians actually honored her. She had a memorial at the Unitarian Church when we were organizing with the MUP.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And I was like, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, because she was like, she was
Committed.
Like really, like she really came out and like, I can't remember one time. I think it was one time there was like somebody that came up to the office. I was making some copies, and some family came up and was like, well, want to know how many, they're trying to get their student into the high school, and they were asking how many Mexican students were in the high school. Kind of like whether they should put their kids there.
Oh wow.
And they were like, and so Michelle, another lady at the office, was kind of like wondering, like, well, why are you asking that? Maureen came out and Ms. Wallace came out, and she's, the Mexican students out here in the school are some of the best and most, most supportive, and she went off on them. I mean, really defensive about kind of what it, and so I think we had that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't think we had that in I worked in a lot of high schools around the county. I don't think there was that there. There was that one, maybe two, three Spanish-speaking teachers or or not even administrators, but maybe the secretaries that were supportive. But that was it. I think we had half the school spoke Spanish, and so and for a small school, that meant a lot. So yeah, so I think that was a big thing, and then a lot of the families, a lot of students, a lot of families got involved. The students also were willing to, give it a shot. So it's like you had a bunch of, at one point it's like, like harder core, like, and maybe not so like, harder, maybe gang affiliated or whatnot, or they could be gang affiliated, dancing folklorico and whatnot. You kind of almost had to get into it, to be part of the in crowd, and so yeah,
so and then who's directing folklorico at this point?
Yeah, so it was really interesting because
and part of it is like in my mind, like the folklorico at this time is kind of like the precursor to what in what you brought with like the Azteca and like so not only the spread of folklorico but eventually the spread of the Azteca culture movement here in the North Bay and the Bay and then beyond. But like it seemed like a lot of it came out of the folklorico movement, and to some extent there was like, would you say there was a political edge to the folklorico? I mean, maybe not openly, but like it had its political component.
Well, I mean, we certainly had a lot of power in the school. Like I told you about, just the how it commanded so many parents, parent involvement and whatnot. So I think the parents had something to relate to, and something to defend. I think, and so definitely a lot of the energy that came in when sometimes having to address certain issues in the school or around Ballet Folklorico, dancing space and whatnot, and like where's the money going to go, and the time that we spent out of class, and so there was certainly a lot of parent involvement. So that was a lot of power, right? And so the fact that we were generating our own income, like we were charged. We had business cards, and I remember Marshall Turbeville, which is now the fire chief in that area. I remember one time he was a senior and he went up to Nugent and he's like, "Man, because you guys got business cards? That was almost like a business." And so they were questioning, why we were making, the money and whatnot. So there was that. But I think along with that, I think just that involvement we had, like I was able to go to Washington, D.C. when I was in 10th grade, 10th, maybe 11th grade, I think, 10th grade maybe. I went to Washington, D.C. with the Closeup Foundation, but all those opportunities were generated because of that involvement. I went with Juana Zamora, so she went as a chaperone. We went, there was 6 of us, and so I think most of the people that went were all in Ballet Folklorico. I think, and so when I came back from Washington, I mean, having also Nugent, having him as a history professor, I mean, I don't think I was very...
Tell, así, like a little, yeah. Tell Fernando Nugent is a name that you bring up a lot, and for me, I feel like he was like a conduit to some politics, some like movement association. Like, who was he? What was he doing?
Well, he was very controversial, I think, but I think in his right, like, he was able to, had a lot of influence when he was a student at Sonoma State, from what I found out, somehow influencing the Intercultural Center or whatever.
Chicano?
I don't know where he was from. Nobody really knew where he was from. He just said he was a citizen of the world and whatnot. But he was a history teacher. So he taught all the history classes plus like political science and economics and I don't know, maybe economics. No, I don't think it was economics, but anyway, so all the critical thinking and all this other stuff. So nice. So he taught all of that, but also he was involved with. So there was a push. He would always question. He would always really push a lot of like, especially a lot of Mexicanos, a lot of raza, like, what are you gonna do? Like, no seas this or no seas that. Like, you gotta One time I remember Heriberto, a friend of mine, getting so upset at Fernando Nugent, and basically Nugent kind of turning around and is like, "What are you gonna do?" He's trying to get all that anger and really, shift it into something positive and whatnot. So he was that driving force. I mean, but he gave a lot. He gave a lot to the students. Like he would always drive us around to the different ballet folklorico presentations. He put his credential on the line because I think that's what we needed. For the ballet folklorico and whatnot. So he did a lot of that, and around that time I think, or maybe a little bit after, he started "Sabes lo que pasa raza" in KBF.
Oh, like a show?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's called "Sabes lo que pasa raza."
Speaking Spanish, or he was speaking?
He would speak in Spanish,
Órale.
all in Spanish. KBF until now it's like been like bilingual.
Right.
I think back in the days bilingual was just a cover up. Just to get a bilingual, just to get a Spanish public station, but it was all in Spanish, and he would coordinate voting blocks. He's like, take out your voting manuals. This is how you're gonna vote, and he would basically tell them how you're gonna vote out there on the air, and he got into a lot of people and I can assure you there was a lot of raza, conservative raza, basically, being egged on by a lot of more conservative white folk that were really, pushing for his ouster of KBBF.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
And
wow.
I think they might have actually done it. But anyway, we had that force at Geyser. But I think he was doing that while all the other, he was like the stern kind of force there with all the students, kind of like, you better shape up. And then you had Reina and Juana. They were pretty stern too. They were pretty but they were there for also like just kind of academically really supporting us and whatnot. So but so we
Would you consider him or them like part of your first like political inclinations? Like, oh shit, like there's another world. Oh shit, we got to defend ourselves. Oh like what? Were you starting to develop political ideas around this time?
I think the first thing that comes to mind with that is as actually Reina Salgado. We were in the Ballet Folklorico, and KBBF asked us to dance for a fundraiser, and for KBBF. And I remember that I asked like, what's the fundraiser for? I would think I was like the president, vice president, or something like that of the Folklorico, maybe junior year, something like that. And so what had happened is that KBBF had gotten sued by students at Sonoma State because they were, so the rumor had it, this is how I understood it, I don't know how, maybe if you go back and like search, maybe I'm wrong, but how we got it is like, I guess there was a student block at Sonoma State, and then, or former Sonoma State students, some of them machistas, that took KBBF to court because of somehow a larger Spanish-speaking public radio station in the valley was trying to bring it down so they could actually get the signal, because the signal was so powerful. I mean, it's a weak signal, but it's at the top of Mount St. Helena. So Mount St. Helena. So it's a pretty powerful signal. It becomes a pretty powerful signal. So they wanted the signal, and so they sued the radio station. So I think there's something there, and so that's kind of how they explained it to me. And so we're like, wait, why are we gonna go and dance for somebody that's getting sued by people that we respected? Like, I think at that point, I think Reina Salgado was involved. She had been a machista. Magdaleno Manzanares, who was now, over in New Mexico, he's like an administrator over. So he was
Radio Bilingüe.
I think it was Radio Bilingüe, and the Morales family had a play in that. So they had tried to defend, or KBF staying, local and whatnot. I think so. There was some rumblings about that, and so I remember that was my first time that I was like, I'm actually doing something political, because I'm actually resisting actually going and dancing for this entity when I believe in the students. Like the students were, because some of the students or former students at Sonoma State were Magdaleno, who was my history professor at Adelante, and his wife Elvia Diaz, and Aida Diaz's sister.
Oh.
Maybe you should ask her what really happened. But anyway, so somehow these students, former students at Sonoma State, had sued KBBF in order to, I don't know, something happened there. But I think that was one of the things that really started, and so I think it wasn't necessarily Nugent that did it, but I think it was the environment that allowed a lot of the questioning. Started questioning and so.
Well, it seems like he was also like pushing you all to like clarify who you were and who you wanted to be. So, and then around this time, I imagine, is where I hear like Professor Dr. Francisco Vazquez telling stories of like you busing from freaking Cloverdale all the way down to Sonoma State for the Latino Student Congress. These kind of sounded like monthly meetings of different high schools coming together at SSU and engaging in I don't know exactly what it was, but it sounds like that's around this same time.
It was interesting because so during these times that during when I was probably even freshman, sophomore year, whatnot, we had been involved with Mayo Club. We would come to Sonoma State for volleyball tournaments. So Mecha at Sonoma State would host this annual volleyball tournament between high schools.
Dang.
At Sonoma State, and it was cool. It was awesome. One, because you got to see other kids from other schools, and they all had Mayo clubs, right? And so they had Geisville, a small school, was always like getting these little trophies. So we had this. For us, it's like we had trophies where all the football and basketball and other trophies were and whatnot at school. And it's in Mayo Club, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But it was Mecha who organized it. But one time I had an interesting experience with a Mechista where I was like, I don't know, the play didn't go our way, and I'm like, I developed this resentment towards them. And so I went to Nugent one time. I'm like, Nugent, when I was about to graduate, he said, get involved with Mecha. And I'm like, nah, they're I had that resentment, right? Yeah. And he's like, no, you got to put that aside. You should get involved in some way. So anyway, so it was one of those volleyball tournaments. We had started to come to Sonoma State. We were very involved through the Mayo Club, and around that time, I think it was we came to a Mecha event. I think it was volleyball, and it was a concert. They brought these rappers, and there was a rap group that actually had they were throwing out cassettes, and one of the songs was like a Mecha song or something like that. It was pretty strong.
Dang.
And so aside from the tapes that were being thrown out, these flyers were kind of passed out. And one of these flyers was a Latino Student Congress flyer. So all the students that were working, so these were college students of Francisco,
right,
who were, I guess, to where the organizers were. Yeah. So they went out, they passed out flyers, and so I got one of these flyers, and it looked pretty interesting. So they come in, and you're gonna, there's a meeting at Sonoma State, and so I remember, it was really interesting because I didn't have transportation. I was living in Healdsburg, but I was living at the Pasalacqua Ranch. It wasn't necessarily in Cloverdale. Yeah. Eventually I moved to Cloverdale, but I was working at the Pasalacqua Ranch. And I think I might have left my car in Healdsburg and then got one of their students or I might have taken the bus. Yeah. But then one of the students took me back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Something like that. I can't remember how it happened, but it was out there and it was way out there. And so I think it just, but it was complicated, I think, but I went to that meeting. And so the meeting was basically, I remember some of those students, like Eloisa's sister was there. There was a couple of twins from Pioneer, and that we kind of, as we grow older, kind of see each other here and there. Yeah. The Bravo sisters, I think it was, and Eloisa's sister, and Juan Roman's sister-in-law. I can't remember her name, but anyway, so she was part of that first class.
Teresa's
That sounds familiar, but so anyway,
Not
so,
Cooper.
no, sister-in-law.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, so that was a part of the first class, but it was interesting. We would go and we would get together every month, and we would look at issues in the community. But I remember like also being involved with like, we were kind of taken to all these different political gatherings.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a Democratic Party gathering one time that we went to. We went to a very bougie gathering up in Hillsbury. And we were in the living room talking to some people, and they were asking us about whether we preferred Chicano, Latino, Hispanic, or whatever. And at that time, I was in high school, and I'm like, what? What is that? And so anyway, so that's kind of, remember, so it did start politicizing us in a sense, and I think, and then, we graduated, and then he brought in, from the Latino Student College, we got a pin, he brought in Dr. Loco, we had an event at Sonoma State. So it was that, but it was a core of students from different high schools that would get together, and I remember that at one point I think it was somebody else got involved with me from Geyser, but I was the only one I think that kind of kept going.
But there was a space that was being created that was like trying, pushing the political consciousness to some extent amongst high schoolers in the county. And then around this time, does the UFW have a presence in your life? Obviously they're in the county. The UFW is probably stronger in the county at this point. But were they in your realm of politics in your life?
Yeah. So in 93, 94, when Cesar Chavez passed away. So so with Ballet Folklorico, we went and danced with Cesar Chavez a couple of times.
Cool.
He came out to the parish, to the Guadalupe Church a couple of times, and they were trying to start probably organize around Gallo. I wasn't too aware of what was going on. I knew that Gerardo Sanchez had graduated a couple of years before I did. And he had come back, and he was in Mecha at the JC, and so he brought a video. It was called No Grapes. So it was the grape boycott was going on and whatnot. So it was that started kind of.
It was VHS. It was like put that in.
So
rewind that.
I remember watching that, and I'm like, oh, that's not cool, And I couldn't differentiate what table grapes and wine grapes and whatnot. But I was like, oh, that's going on, huh? And then so Cesar Chavez started kind of popping up, right, and whatnot, and so. So in '94, when he passed away, I went to a mass. At the Guadalupe Church. This is like the little hall. Yeah, the little hall. It was nothing like what it is now.
Yeah.
It was like a little. This house is probably bigger than what it was, and so there was a lady that I can't remember her name. There was this lady that went up there, and she's like, at 9 o'clock there's a bus leaving Petaluma to the Leno, and I was like, what? And I was still living in the Pasalaco Ranch in '94. 93. I guess maybe '93. Yeah, 1993. So I passed away, I think. So I booked it, got my wallet in a sarape, and came back to Petaluma with a few bucks, and got on the bus. Took off to the Leno, and I went to the funeral.
Wow.
Did the march.
Shit.
Damn.
And so took off, and on the way back is where I met the Sanchez family. So on the way back, going on the bus, the lady saw me. It's like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm here. And it's like, okay, cool, you came. I can't remember her name. I've seen her. She got sick, but anyway, I would see her here and there. So anyway, she's like, is there anybody with you? I said, no. She's like, sit here behind the driver's seat. Horrible place to sit because you couldn't extend your legs. So I drove all the way to Delano all night with my feet all cramped up. And so we get there, and it was like 4 a.m, and there was like a line to go stand guard, with a flag. And so we went there. We did that, and then we got some coffee. And then we had to walk to where the where they were starting the march,
Uh-huh.
and then we walked back. So it was like a whole day, and they came back. On the way back is when I met Maria Lina Garcia.
Mm.
Maria Lina Garcia, she passed away. That's along with Freddie's sister.
Mm-hmm.
So Maria Lina was a student at Santa Rosa High School,
Mm.
and so she's like, "Oh, this is my aunt, Alicia. This is my mom." So I met Alfredo. I met all the Sanchez family and whatnot. Freddie was just like probably maybe younger than Andy, something like that. And so on the way back is when I started I got to know them a little bit more because on the way over there, I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
On the way back, I had seen them,
Interesting.
kind of in the group.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's younger folks here, not just me, and so I started talking to them and whatnot. I think Hortensia might have been on there, Marilina's sister. So that's where I think Alicia was there.
And is that when you came back and now you know more people? Is that like influence you getting like pushed or thrust or getting more involved in like the political?
So I started asking, started kind of getting into it. So I graduated in '94. And then so what happened was that in '94 the big thing that was going on was Proposition 187.
Yeah, 187.
And
Pete
so
Wilson
that
passing
hit
the
big
most
time.
racist law.
And so I was at the junior college, and Maria Lina was organizing all the students at Santa Rosa High School, and I was in Mecha at the JC, and we started, kind of organizing. They had organized a walkout, and Machistas kind of hosted them. I had to kind of step in because it was chaos at first. So that's why I was like, I saw her again out there, kind of organizing and whatnot, all the students. And then again, here's Alicia, here's Alfredo, and all them, and so I started kind of getting connected. And then soon after that, I was like, well, okay, started asking questions about like the UFW and whatnot. And so I was at the JC for a while. I think it was maybe while I was still the JC that I started. I met Nati. So Nati was kind of just doing pro bono work.
Nati Ramirez.
So she was doing like just volunteering at the UFW. She was doing translations. She was doing all kinds of stuff on her own time. And I met Salvador Mendoza, who was, so he had been working, I think, in Napa, and so he kind of booked it over here and started organizing.
He was as a farm worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he started kind of, organizing around here, and
With the union.
And so the union didn't have an office here, and then eventually they got a small space right there at the Carpenter's Hall.
Yeah, the Corby.
And so that's where I kind of would go, and then they
Hold
gave
on.
me a key.
Nice.
And then so I would come in, I would do translations as best as I could, and to workers that would come. But then also like, oh, we're gonna go to this protest here, we're gonna go to that protest there, and I would just book it with them,
Nice.
and they would just throw me in the back of the car. And one time I drove all the way to Watsonville in the back of a Suburban. No, it was like a station wagon.
All right.
In the back of the station wagon, I just todos bien crudos, and I was the only kid in the back, so it was like 5 cents for fairness and strawberry workers out there. And so anyway,
That's it. So that's interesting. Like
Yes.
Cesar's passing is actually a moment for you to like go down and come back new. You're coming back with more contact. Prop 187's happening at that point. There's fucking activism all over. So not only are you coming back, but there's like something to come back to. It sounds like there was energy. People are fucking pissed off. Like so many of your generation, specifically my generation to some extent, like Prop 187 was a political moment where like fuck that. Like so many people actually became political at that moment. This is 94.
Yeah, 94.
And then fucking.
And then you couldn't rest because it's like 1996 it was 227. 209. Which was affirmative action.
Yeah.
And then 2 years after that, it's a bilingual education, 227. So, if we would have been charging for our time, shit, we would have been rich because of how much we actually been on the street. So around the time that I was at the JC and whatnot, doing mecha, brought the ballet folklorico. There was a ballet folklorico at the JC that was starting, and so they were starting up, and so I had been dancing, and they're like, "Well, you're it, dude. You're the teacher." So I started teaching some of the stuff that I had learned, but then we eventually got another teacher. I think she's in Petaluma right now. But anyway, so started dancing there, but did mecha there. Started getting involved with mecha there
At the junior college.
and mecha at the same time. Mecha and the UFW, volunteering for the UFW at the same time. and then had a really strong connection. Started getting a stronger connection with Sonoma State. So Sonoma State Mecha had kind of just gone up and down. A lot of their older mechistas who had the volleyball tournament, they all had graduated, and a lot of the younger machistas or whatnot went into fraternities and sororities.
Yeah.
You know, I think there were some of them that kind of resisted in some way, but created a quasi sorority thing with like Quetzal, with that Donancy was involved. I don't know, don't know too much about how that went, but that was like before my time. But I think when I got into the JC, I think Sonoma State was kind of in its downfall, I guess, until there was a group that came up from Cuesta College, up in San Luis Obispo area or whatnot.
Okay.
So Maricela, Maria, and all. Then they came up and they started creating another mecha. By the time I got to Sonoma State, we had kind of rekindled it again,
Nice.
right? And so Ronnie kind of joined in, and
Right on.
Big old Argentine.
yeah, so Ronnie and I mean, it was like United Nations. Like we
Can't remember Kenny?
Yeah, we had Argentinians, yeah, Chilenos and everything. I was like, yeah, it was, and it was. I mean, it was pretty cool because I think we were doing
And
some
Mariana's around there.
So yeah, Mariana starts coming in. So I think when I transferred, Mariana was already there. Was coming in, and so Mariana had been my one of she might have been one of my migrant students at El Cialan with Minicore,
Wow. Interesting.
with California Minicore, because that was kind of like my job during college, since the JC and whatnot. But yeah, so
Any names you want to shout out for Minicore? Because the other thing I think about when I hear you in Minicore is like, this is you, like now you're in like a teaching role because you're taking people on fucking hikes. You're taking people on, you're the camp leader. You're like the camp counselor. And so little Chicanitos are starting to be like, oh, like following, and then like you're having to teach.
Little
yeah,
chicanitos.
so yeah, no, so Minicore, I was introduced with Minicore early, I think, since I was in high school, because Minicore has had a conference called Fuentes Culturales, which was started by a Geyserville alum, one of the Torres family members, and I remember that one time we somebody, a professor somewhere said, was not from Geyserville, said, Geyser has gifted like Sonoma County like all these leaders, and all, so because I was a product of a lot of this leadership that had graduated, like the Jerry's, but also like Jaime and Alberto Torres and all the Torres families and all that, like they started a Ballet Folklorico. I mean, they did a lot of that. The Flores family and whatnot. So it's the it was so Minicore. So I went to the Minicore conferences, right? And so I remember that I think as a student. So I went as a student, and then later on I did some artwork or whatever. And then all of a sudden, when I was in high school, they asked me if I would be interested in teaching a workshop on Chicano art. And so I did. So Aida
does art.
Aida was involved.
Oh, really?
In Minicore at that time. She was on the way out. And so I remember that I did Chicano art with somebody. And so I went out and I did. I brought in Chicano art or whatever.
Nice.
Chicano art.
Do you remember what it was?
I can't remember what it was. I mean, I remember. No, I remember going up there and I was like, it was. I can't remember how.
You weren't doing any like beadwork or anything like that.
No, I can't. It was somebody else took the lead, but definitely, I think it was by my senior year I was able to do one. So when I got into when I graduated, it was just I think a year after I graduated, Cristina Reveles reached out and was like, "You want to be part of Minicore?" And so that's how I got into Minicore. And then part of Minicore, I was able to go into the high schools. At least for me, it was high school. El Cialan was my first assignment. Then Hillsburg, Santa Rosa High, and then went back to Hillsburg. I think. So anyway, so I was in the high schools during the year, but in the summer I was able to land a job going for outdoor education, which they never let underclassmen in. So it was like upperclassmen in Minicore. So these were already kind of, you're going to go into become a teacher, you're going to graduate already, And so you would go out to the different. There was 5 teams throughout California, and then the migrant education would grab all these different students from all these different areas, and they would send them all to a camp to go to camping. And so they would come on Monday, and then they would leave on Friday. And so they gave us a training of, I think it was like 3 days out in Yosemite.
Cool.
In the Yosemite area, 3 days they trained you on what you're supposed to be doing, from ropes courses, low element ropes course to science and so I was like, I had to learn like what a lesson plan as soon as I joined Mini Corps. So but Juana Zamora was out there. She had been at Kaiserville High School, so she was already a coordinator, not the director yet. But so it was a friendly face out there, and somehow I got in. One of the former directors, Sid Tarango, said, "Who's your coordinator at Sonoma State?" I'm saying, "Well, who's your coordinator for Mini Corps Indoor?" During the indoor, I was like, "Oh, it's Cristina Reveles." "Oh, that's how you got in." So she had some pull there, I guess. But
Nice.
but anyway, so that's how I landed in outdoor ed. I did outdoor ed every year, every summer.
Cool.
Yeah, you at your nature are a camp counselor. You're like icebreaker, like little
And so that's
games
where I
and
learned
shit.
a lot of those icebreakers and whatnot. We used to call it initiatives. Icebreakers, like, oh, it's not an icebreaker. It's going to be initiative. It was the initial point of acquiring skills and developing strategies on for life,
Mira,
whatnot.
mira.
So
That's what it said on the lesson plan in it.
Yeah.
no, Mini Corps actually had that. Like an icebreaker is just like, hey, how you do?
Right.
But I think
Right.
in Mini Corps, how we were taught, it was like, this is going to be it's going to be more than an icebreaker, right? So you're going to go into the lesson, and that lesson is going to have a lot more impact.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so we used to call them initiatives instead of icebreakers. So anyway, so I think so definitely Mini Corps played a huge role. Christina was, a lot of folks called her mom, and, because she took care of everybody, like in the group, and got together once a month, and kind of sometimes she was always asking us, have we eaten? So like our families were, sometimes we wouldn't see our families most of the day and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so we would see her at Sonoma State. I started teaching. I started doing indoor, and then I became a recruiter for Mini Corps. So I was recruiting Mini Corps students. So I remember that's how I ended the Mini Corps, my Mini Corps years, because I was even in the Mini Corps office, typing a paper all night, because I didn't have a computer. And I needed to finish a paper for history, and I heard the Pump and Circumstance for the morning graduation class. So I remember I opened the door, and I saw the college students getting in line, slipped the paper under my college professor door, went home, changed, and went back to Sonoma State and graduated. So it saved my life in so many ways, So, but it gave me some cash,
Yeah.
I was able to pay for something, and then it gave me kind of, that and Mecha kind of gave me that place to be at Sonoma State,
Yeah.
and made it worthwhile as well.
Yeah.
Nice.
So let's hang on one sec. I'm gonna stop this. Just